Friends, these two individuals took the lives of their twins. In today's video, we will unravel this insanity with some shocking twists and moronic decision making. We start in the state of Florida. The courtroom fell silent as the jury attentively listened to the opening statements in the murder trial of Leslie Demeniuk, a mother from Ponte Vedra accused of killing her twin sons. The prosecution began to unravel the details, painting a picture of a premeditated and cold-blooded crime. It was March 2001 when the serene Sawgrass Country Club was shaken by an incident that sent shockwaves through the community. Prosecutors alleged that Demeniuk, driven by a desire to harm her soon-to-be ex-husband, fatally shot her 4-year-old twin sons, Jamie and Johnny, at their father's home. And this is why in the beginning I said moronic decision making, because if you murder your children, that's crazy. To do it to spite your husband? What the hell? Court documents mistakenly released in 2002 revealed Leslie's confession. She admitted to the heinous crime, stating, "I shot both boys in the head. I think I shot Jamie twice. I think I shot one of them twice." The state's case against Leslie was built upon a history of drug use and allegations of intoxication on the day of the murders. The prosecution argued that Leslie had mixed antidepressants with alcohol, leading to an altered state of mind. According to court documents, her blood alcohol content was 3 times the legal limit. Leslie's defense team planned to present an insanity defense, claiming that her mental state was compromised at the time of the murders. Yes, it was compromised, but being an idiot is not a mental state. However, their attempt to attribute her insanity to the combination of alcohol, depressants, and drugs was rejected. Judge John Alexander ruled that there was insufficient scientific evidence to support this claim, a decision later upheld by the Florida Supreme Court. The prosecution presented their case, calling witnesses who painted a bleak picture of Leslie's behavior and mental state leading up to the murders. Thomas, the father of the victims, took the stand and testified about his ex-wife's excessive drinking and his concerns regarding her ability to care for their children. The couple had been granted a divorce just 4 days before the tragic incident. Thomas recounted the harrowing details of his last encounter with his twin sons, expressing his love for them and his fear for their well-being under their mother's care. The courtroom was filled with a profound sense of grief as he shared his failed attempts to ensure the safety of his children. The defense began presenting their case, portraying Leslie as a troubled and depressed woman whose actions were driven by a combination of medications and emotional turmoil. They called experts, including psychologist Dr. David Menkes, who had examined Leslie over a year after the crime. Dr. Menkes argued that the combination of antidepressants and sedatives could have severe side effects. Well duh, I don't need 10 years of school to tell you that, potentially rendering Leslie temporarily insane. Prosecutors vigorously challenged this assertion during cross-examination, emphasizing the fact that Leslie exhibited coherent behavior immediately after the shootings. The doctor admitted that Leslie knew what she had done and understood the consequences, but he maintained that she did not perceive her actions as morally wrong. As the trial reached its final phase, both the prosecution and the defense called upon expert witnesses to support their respective cases. The prosecution enlisted the help of forensic psychologist Dr. Robert McCary, who concluded that Leslie was not insane at the time of the murders. Dr. McCary's testimony underscored the calculated nature of the crime, stating that Leslie had planned the killings in advance, demonstrating premeditation and malice. The defense countered with forensic psychiatrist Dr. Stephen Simring, who argued that Leslie's mental state was significantly impaired due to the combination of substances. Dr. Simring posited that Leslie's capacity for rational judgment and self-control was diminished, ultimately leading to the tragic outcome. After weeks of emotional testimony and intense deliberation, the fate of Leslie rested in the hands of the jury. Leslie was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder for killing her twin sons. The prosecution decided not to seek the death penalty for Leslie, leaving the sentencing to the judge. Leslie faced the possibility of spending the rest of her life in prison. Now, taking into account the severity of the crime and the impact of the victim's family, the judge handed down a sentence of 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Now, Leslie did appeal the verdict, and this is what the court documents said. Leslie indicated to the trial court that her insanity was substance-induced, which she asserts led to involuntary intoxication and the eventual deaths of her children. In support of her position, she retained 2 more doctors, the original, David Menkes, and Ernest Miller, who provided reports supporting her claim of insanity. These doctors attributed Leslie's insanity to the prescribed use of modern antidepressants known as SSRIs. Among the SSRIs marketed commonly are Zoloft and Paxil. According to experts, her use of SSRIs caused akathisia, which in turn caused Leslie to self-medicate with alcohol to an involuntary 0.27 level and resulted in her killing her children. In response, the state also hired 2 experts, Dr. Alan Waldman and Dr. Douglas Jacobs. These doctors denied the existence of SSRI-induced akathisia with resulting homicidal actions, and both assert that the scientific principles upon which the defense relies are not generally accepted in the scientific community. This is all going on during her appeal. The trial court, however, declined to consider their testimony. The state then filed 2 motions in limine regarding the assertion of SSRI-induced homicidal behavior. They contended that the matters proposed to be testified by the defense experts were subject to analysis. Now, initially, the trial court, by letter to counsel, denied the motion for a hearing. Specifically, the state objected to the testimony of the defense experts concerning an alleged causal connection between and SSRIs, and concerning the proposed testimony that taking SSRIs cause involuntary alcohol consumption. The state contended that the defense testimony on neither subject was pure opinion, that the conclusions were new and novel. The trial court eventually agreed to consider the issues raised and set a hearing in February of 2004. Now, at the hearing, Dr. Menkes, who was the only witness, testified for about 5 hours. When the state cross-examined Dr. Menkes concerning studies he relied on reaching his opinion on the SSRIs, the witness related that he based his opinion on 2 studies regarding premenstrual syndrome that were undertaken in 92 and 93, and on a 3rd unpublished Scottish study regarding depression suffered by some women during premenstrual time periods. He agreed that he had not personally been engaged in research trials of the drugs, but said that he used the results of that research in his clinical practice. The hearing was continued at the conclusion of Dr. Menkes' testimony. When the hearing reconvened a month later, the trial judge simply announced at the outset that he decided to deny the state's motion to exclude the testimony of Dr. Menkes and whoever else is going to testify as to the SSRIs. Anyway, with all that hullabaloo and all that crap, eventually her appeal was rejected and she is spending the rest of her life in jail. And again, why did this idiot do it? Because she hated her husband. Oh my god, he divorced you 4 days later? So the fuck what? If you're drunk half the time and taking drugs, what do you think is going to happen, muppet? Now I'm going to move on to my next story. We go to Canada in the year of 2002. Trust me, this story is so profound. On August 4th, 2002, Nelson Hart drove his 3-year-old twin daughters to a secluded beach just west of Gander in Newfoundland, where both girls drowned. The deaths had no witnesses. Hart, who was 33 at the time and unable to swim, told police that upon seeing the first girl fall in the water, he jumped into his grey Dodge Shadow and drove for help. With rumors of mental illness and a gambling problem, Hart came under immediate suspicion. But let's first take a look at his background. By age 12, Hart had already spent 3 years in grade 5. He had reading difficulties. He frequently refused to go to the hospital for serious seizures, fearing the doctors, and then by his mid-20s he was jobless and living at home. His seizures grew worse. The episodes became so severe that in October 97, the provincial government arranged for him to receive live-in care, hiring Jennifer Hicks, a young woman. But Hart wanted more than a nurse, and before long, he and Jennifer were lovers. Soon, she was pregnant with the twins. Karen and Krista were born on March the 9th, 1999. Now Hart, who had broken his neck in a car accident the year before their births, received something of a windfall, a $25,000 insurance claim. But when social services discovered the award, they forced him to sell his purchases and relinquish the money. That's when everything started to go downhill for Nelson. By the time of the drownings, he was spending what little money he had on gambling. Such were his circumstances on the morning of August 4th, 2002, when Hart drove his girls to their deaths. The family had been looking forward to the day's demolition derby, part of the annual festival of flight celebrations that locals call Gander Day. Jennifer got the girls ready, but needed a shower and to do her hair. Now, due to Nelson's fits, he had always avoided being alone with the twins, but that day he loaded them into his Dodge Shadow and asked where they'd like to go. With that, they set out for Little Harbor, part of Gander Lake. Upon their arrival, Hart first retrieved Krista from the back seat, setting her on the ground. Then Karen. He had just put the second child down and shut the car door when he says he suffered a massive seizure. Hart recalls one of the girls running, but cannot remember whether she was running toward him or the water. He looked and saw Krista jump into the water. The fit left him confused. All I could picture was Jennifer, he says. Where's Jennifer? I could see her, but I couldn't get to her. Though he knows he got behind the wheel of his car, he does not remember driving home. He went home, he picked up Jennifer, and he went back to the harbor. His wife said it didn't seem like Nelson was going fast enough, but he had the gas to the floor. At the beach, we found Krista into the water, she said. She had drifted into the middle of the harbor beyond reach. Jennifer, who couldn't swim either, began searching the surrounding forest for Karen, who had disappeared entirely. Nelson, meanwhile, raced to a nearby gas station and called authorities. Paramedics retrieved Krista, who somehow survived but died the following day in hospital, and found Karen in the water 10 meters from the wharf, dead. As police drove away from Little Harbor for questioning later that morning, Hart suffered a second seizure. I love my daughters, says Hart, my own flesh and blood. There are times when I cried. And at this point, with no witnesses, there's not much the police could do. Until a few years later. Look at how they trapped him. Listen to this. Nelson met a random person, a man by the name of Steph Suave, in the winter of 2005. When he pulled up and asked for directions. Then he pulled out a photograph of a young woman with long blonde hair. She was Steph's sister. He said she was a drug addict who gambled away her days in the local bars. Their mother, he added, had lung cancer in Montreal and longed to see her daughter before she died. Could Hart help him look for her? I'll give you $50, Suave said. Nelson thought, oh wow, $50? I could use that money. Let me go help him. When he failed to locate his sister in Grand Falls, Suave gave him $50 more and a carton of cigarettes to search another nearby town, but they never did find the woman. The following day, Suave offered him more money to collect a package from his hotel and make a delivery. Before long, Suave was giving Hart all manner of odd jobs. He and a group of associates said they ran a trucking outfit and handed Hart business cards. Hart and his wife, who rode along on several trips, were meanwhile being treated by his new employers to pizza dinners and garlic fingers and free hotel rooms. One night, Suave uncorked a bottle of champagne and sprayed the contents on the ceiling. He was earning more in part because Suave had begun sending him on trips to the mainland on increasingly mysterious errands. But then the truth was revealed. Hart learned he'd been recruited by an organized crime group. He traveled extensively in ensuing months to Halifax, Fredericton, Montreal, and Vancouver. According to Hart, the men had him transporting everything from casino chips and passports to truckloads of cigarettes and cash. It didn't take long for Hart himself to feel vulnerable. He was in Montreal with Suave when the latter received a call. "We gotta see the boss," Suave told him. Word had arrived from Gander that a member of a rival gang was poised to tell police that he'd witnessed Hart drown his daughters. The boss, Suave said, was very rich and powerful, a man in control of the underworld. People go there and get cremated, flush down the toilet, bye-bye, send you a postcard, Suave said. His meeting with the boss was held in a hotel room in Vancouver. He was a hard-looking fella, Hart says. I'm afraid, Nelson, the boss told him. Tell me how you done away with your daughters. Hart protested, Never, sir. Never. I never hurt my daughters. Hart went on to say, I'm epileptic, sir. And the boss said, No. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to the boss. Hart was terrified. He then uttered a confession. He said, I drowned my daughters. I pushed them over the wharf. He told the boss, describing how he knocked the girls into the waters of Little Harbour with his knee. The confession flooded him with a sense of relief. He said, I knew I wouldn't have my ribs broke. I knew I wasn't going to be made away with. After the meeting, the boss greeted his employees. Me and Nelson had a chat. He told them, Nelson's okay. Then back in Grand Falls, Hart got a call from Suave. The gang would take care of the man threatening to reveal Hart's secret, he said. Hart said he told Suave he wanted no part in a murder. Suave reassured him, saying that they would take care of him. Still, Hart wanted an alibi. Suave told him he would call ahead of time, giving Hart a chance to get in front of security camera for proof he'd been elsewhere. Hart and his wife were doing their laundry when the call arrived. According to Jennifer, his wife, he did not even permit her to retrieve their clothes, nor would he tell her why he so desperately needed to get to Walmart. Inside, Hart turned to her. Jennifer said, Look up at the camera and smile. They stared into the camera for 20 minutes inside Walmart. The following day, on June 13, 2005, the police arrested Hart at the airport in Gander, where Suave had directed him to pick up a plane ticket for yet another trip to the mainland. As police gathered outside his car, Hart tried to place a call to Suave. The police said, There's no point in calling Steph. He's with us. Crown prosecutors were armed with Hart's videotaped confessions to the murders, intercepted by hidden cameras. Suave, the boss, and the others Hart met on his journeys were not gangsters they claimed to be, but they were all undercover police officers, part of an elaborate police ruse known as Mr. Big Operation. Such silence on the part of police leaves Nelson as the sole voice in the story of the police operation. The degree to which he participated, how willing he was to move what he believed was contraband, says how hard the boss needed to work for Nelson's alleged confession, remains unknown beyond his account. At Nelson's preliminary hearing, Jennifer was outside the courtroom when Steph, who the pair referred to by his real name, walked by and said, Hello, my son. Cheeky bastard. Jennifer told him, You got some nerve on you. Indeed, Nelson's family believed him to be innocent and condemned the police. I think they overstepped their boundaries, said his wife, a position she held even after watching the taped confession. In June 2005, Nelson was charged with first-degree murder in connection to the deaths of his twin daughters. His trial began in February 2007, 5 years following the deaths of the children. Hart's defense maintained that he suffered an epileptic episode leading to his children being unsupervised and ultimately ending up in the lake. His confession, his lawyer argued, was coerced by undercover police officers who Nelson was trying to impress in order to keep his cash flow in his new career as a criminal operative. Hart was ultimately convicted of the murders and sentenced to life in prison. Now, lawyers representing Nelson filed an appeal on his behalf, claiming that the videotape confession obtained by the police was not admissible due to the coercive nature of the confession, combined with the inducements promised to Nelson through the Mr. Big Sting operation. The Supreme Court appeal ultimately agreed and tossed out the confession, leaving the Crown with the option to prove its case against Hart without this videotaped confession that they obtained during this operation. The court also noted that Hart, who had been denied the chance to testify in his original trial due to his fears of speaking in public, should have been accommodated and allowed to testify in private due to his tendency towards epileptic seizures brought on by stress. Eventually, in 2014, 12 years after his daughters drowned under his watch, Nelson was released from jail with the guarantee that he would never face more charges. Donovan Malloy, Director of Public Prosecutions, said the confessions obtained by the police was central to the Crown's case against Nelson and that he could not proceed a new trial without them, because he knew without these statements there was no likelihood of conviction, so he released Nelson. Wow, that story is so crazy. But let's go back to Leslie. One idiot. Her life was obviously shit, which is probably why she was drinking so much, taking so many drugs. Whatever the case, whatever the reason was, call it child abuse, call it trauma or whatever, I'm sure that played a part. She put a bullet in her twin sons' heads. A bullet. Cold blood. Because her husband wanted to leave. Why do you think he wanted to leave, you fucking idiot? And as for Nelson, I mean, that story I just have to take at face value. There's nobody else is there. He's got a history of medical conditions. He has suffered from different kind of addictions, like gambling and all that kind of stuff. And if he says he has a seizure, and if there was no other evidence or whatever in this case, then well, I mean, there's not much you can do but to let him free. If you believe he drowned his children, fair, that's completely fine. But given the evidence at the time, I don't think you can really convict him, which is why the police had to go through this big elaborate scam of a big sting operation, which I'm not gonna lie, nicely done. What a way to trap a man, you know? But yeah, anyway, comment. Tell me what you think.